Welcome to Flipped Classroom. Today's lesson is a review of the summer reading assignment Whirligig. Let's begin by a review of the main and minor characters. Brent is the main character. He's a 17-year-old new kid in town who's experienced lots of moves throughout his youth. After a frustrating night at a party, he has a failed suicide attempt, which leads to the death of Leah Zamora. The judge sentences him to probation and restitution. During his journey of restitution, he discovers his values. The minor characters include Mrs. Zamora, the mother of the victim. It is her idea to send Brent on the whirligig journey. We also meet Mrs. Gill, she's the mediator, and look closely at her dialogues because many of the comments she makes include some wise choice of words. We also meet Brent's parents, who do not want Brent to go to jail and disagree with the whirligig journey. On the journey, the readers also meet the character who's the street sweeper in Florida, the 8th grade girls in Maine, the 5th grade boy, and Jenny's grandma in California, as well as the children on the beach in Florida. Here's some of the main ideas in the plot. As I mentioned earlier, Brent is frustrated at a party when he's rejected by a girl and doesn't fit in with his peers. And driving home is when the drunk driving accident occurs. When the judge provides an opportunity for him to meet the family, Brent seeks out Mrs. Zamora and wants to redeem himself. Mrs. Zamora is the one who sends him on the journey to make the whirligigs, just as Leah's grandfather did, and he goes to 4 different states. He takes the bus and stays in cheap motels, which is completely different than the luxurious lifestyle he's grown up with. The 4 whirligigs are supposed to have some connection to Leah, and they're to be built in California, Maine, Washington, and Florida. At his first stop, he compares himself to the Greek mythological figure Hercules because he has this gigantic task which is supposed to help him, which is supposed to redeem him of his mistakes. When he completes all 4 whirligigs, Brent always takes a picture to send to Mrs. Zamora. Even though he feels isolated in Chicago, along this journey he begins to make connections and develop relationships with people. We first see this with Emil, who actually gives Brent the book 2 years before the mast, which is the book he reads throughout his bus ride. In Florida, he makes connections with the children at the beach, and in Maine, his connection with people develops to the point where he actually confesses his crime to the woman and admits for the first time that it was an act of suicide. Through these relationships, his guilt is slowly released, and by the end, he has a new perspective on life. 2 of the main themes are actions have consequences and isolation. The author develops a theme of bad consequences which follow Brent's reckless driving. But also, on the flip side, it shows that good consequences follow the placement of the whirligigs. That is why there are the small stories of the individuals who are impacted by the whirligigs. The author also develops a theme of isolation, which is caused by Brent's frequent moves and his rejection by peers. On the other side, the various travelers that he creates connections with helps diminish these feelings of isolation and bring Brent to a better understanding of people and relationships and acceptance by others. One of the key metaphors in the book is that the whirligig is a comparison to Brent's life. Whirligigs are chaotic with lots of twists and turns, just like Brent's life has been. But just like when a whirligig finds its perfect spot, everything makes sense. The same with Brent. Once he finds his perfect spot, which are those 4 places that lead him to being content, everything in his life begins to make sense. So you want to ask yourself, how do the whirligigs impact each of the characters' lives? One key quote that is very insightful and you should pay attention to is found on page 38. The mediator says, "We never know all the consequences of our acts. They reach into places we cannot see and into the future where no one can." See if you can apply this quote to the events in the novel. This is the end of our review of your summer reading assignment whirligig. Thank you for joining me today in Flipped Classroom.